Welcome to Winging It. I'm doing a solo outing today. Mark couldn't make it out. We're going to go and visit Heather Gentleman at the gallery. We are. We're in the heart of Yorkville, and this is at the gallery here in the Art Association. Stop and put my mask on. Wow, look at the space, it's amazing. So earlier in the year we were talking to Heather about while she was working on this show, so now it's quite wonderful that we can come in and actually see the work.
So this body of work is called Expedition of the Fantastical. I'm Heather Gentleman. And what this work is looking at is colonization in the Victorian era and looking at colonization on Mars. And I am postulating, are we going to be taking the constructs of colonization forward when we explore other planets? And so the question is, do we want to do that? And what kind of society would we like to live in?
How ethical and humane will it be?
Yes, because I feel like right now I'm standing in the center of going like 120 years in the past and 120 years in the future.
Right,
and
right.
I'm seeing that it's very similar. So, and that's because a lot of it hasn't changed in the present. So it's about looking at what we can do in the present to change.
Right. Be mindful of it. Some of the
yeah.
expositions in the past were. The mindset of the people doing it was different. The worldview even was different.
But you know what I'm finding is interesting is that I'm seeing like the colonial constructs are still functional. We're still living in them, and we're not even aware of it. And so I think I just want to make us aware of these.
True.
And we see that happening with different movements like the Black Lives Matter, COVID-19, and the climate change activism has all come together.
And indigenous peoples who've been huge victims of the colonial mindset, for sure.
Still,
and they still are, absolutely.
Right
Yeah.
Where we see their fisheries are being burnt down, and yet the federal government is just bringing someone to talk to each of the parties involved.
Yeah.
You know, this is not equal. They're not equal footing. It's pretty obvious.
No.
So these two pieces, I'm looking at the type of people that would want to go on an expedition. You know, and so going to the Arctic or the Antarctic, 120 years ago was very dangerous, and they were taking wooden boats. They were wearing woolen clothing. They were eating canned foods. They weren't really prepared to live for long periods of time in the cold. And it's the same thing going to Mars. I mean, we obviously are preparing for it, but it's not particularly safe. And they're both very uninhabitable kind of environments. So I have here Ernest Shackleton, and I also have people who I think would be outliers, people who live in the fringes of society, misfits. These are the kind of people who want to go on these expeditions. And we have, people in the circus, traveling circus, Roma, people in the theater. I've got a tattooed lady from the Victorian era. And what was interesting is I was looking at this ad that Shackleton had put out for looking for sailors who would join his expedition on the Endurance in the Antarctic. Early 1900s, and it said poor wages, harsh environment, may not come back, incredibly cold, honor if you return. And he got 5,000 people to apply for it for 28 slots.
Crazy, eh?
It's crazy. And then Mars One, which is this kind of rogue company that says they're going to Mars, they put out an application that said you will be recycling your own urine for drinking water. You'll have to live. There will be dust storms. You'll be living in small quarters. You cannot engage in any kind of sexual activity. you're going to be spending a lot of time in isolation. It's dangerous. If you get sick, you have to look after yourself. And they got 202,000 applicants for 100 spots. So there are people
There we
that
go.
will look at these kinds of calls and it seems natural and they're excited about it.
Yeah.
So we can come over here, and these are the partner pieces to those ones we just looked at.
Those are amazing. I love them.
Thank you. And this one here, I was thinking about what it was like to go into the deep sea. Well, even now, but certainly in the turn of the century, it was incredibly dangerous. They had these suits with these, I guess these pipes that went up to the surface,
right.
the breathing tube, and really heavy boots that would pull them down to the surface. And if you've ever looked at any of these diving suits, they're terrifying. But they look like, astronaut suits to me. So here's a Victorian explorer under the sea, and I thought I'd kind of have a little bit of play with the idea of roles of women at that time. And of course, there were all these stories about mermaids and the wild woman, which are always very attractive to sailors, yet the women that they were in relationships with, the real live women, were kept in very restrictive kind of environments. And so here we have like the proper woman in a bell jar.
Right.
And I referenced Sylvia Plath in this one, the title. Yeah, and this one here, we know that with colonization in the Victorian era, people were assimilated, they were killed, their land was taken. There was this idea that they had their blank slates, they had no culture, they had no religion.
Yeah.
And so the imperialist culture had to be imposed upon them. But there also was this idea of tokenism and exoticism. And so she's, as a Victorian woman from an imperialist country, is looking at the Maasai, and she's thinking he's really interesting. When I'm having his sword on my, or a sword or a shield on my wall, I'd like to appropriate some of his objects. So they were not really looked at as people with their own autonomy.
It's more like a curiosity.
Yeah.
Recent neurological research has shown that when people have racist thoughts, the part of their brain that recognizes an individual as a human being shuts off, and they actually see the other person as a thing or object. Which allows them to compartmentalize and dehumanize them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, which happens first? Does the neurological shut-off happen first, or is it just, because they want to not see them as people that they just shut it down? But yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm sure that happens often too with the objectification of women as well.
I'm sure that it did. Yeah. And does.
In
fact, yeah. Or the way some people can treat animals. Some people treat them as pet and part of the family. Others, they're just food, livestock.
Yeah, you see how animals are treated in factory farms, and there's no way that these people can
perceive them as living, sentient beings with intelligence.
Unless they're sadists,
Right. Well, that's the other side of it, for sure.
The other side of it.
Yeah. And
I think I'd like to go over to this one over here.
You lead the way, and we'll follow.
Right here. So this one I was referencing the 1884 Berlin Conference, when the European nations came together and decided to create borders in Africa based on their own needs and their own desire for trade and wealth, not taking into consideration at all the people that lived there and the land that they shared and the tribal connections and the trade and families and all of that. And it had some dire consequences for the people there, but they weren't considered, again, like kind of what we were talking about, like they didn't matter.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a culture in their eyes, so they didn't matter. And again, we're seeing a scenario where these decisions are being made based on the needs of the elite and only certain people in society and those in power. And so I was thinking about, right now we have rovers or rockets with rovers going to Mars. They left in July, they're going to get there in February. And we have they have European Union, we have Russia, China, and the United States. And they all have their flags, and they're all representing their own countries.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, when we go to Mars, are we going to be Russian Martians, or American Martians, or Canadian Martians? Or are we going to be Martians? It looks like we're literally taking our colonial constructs to Mars.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think about things like, I remember reading that China found a gel-like substance on the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
I heard nothing since. I don't know if that's because they don't know what it is and they're still studying it, or they decide to keep that information.
Right. Yeah. Secret,
Yeah.
some kind of miracle substance, and we want to use it. We want to patent it.
Yes.
Right. I mean that's right. That's part of that mentality of colonialism when it's expanded to business. Right. Is this patenting? Seeds or.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the thing.
Natural occurring substances.
And it's like it's mine now. I found it.
Yeah. So I can sell it and make a profit because I was the first one to find it or whatever.
Well, actually, that's a really good segue into this one over here.
Okay. Well, that's why. Have you watched all the way to the last episode?
Yeah, I loved it.
And that final scene where China wanted to have their astronaut first on the planet, and she just said, "Fuck you! We're all going together. We're taking a picture together."
With our.
Right. So that's right.
Face, yeah.
Right. So you couldn't racialize it or nationalize it.
Yeah, that was a really powerful image. I love that show. Thank you for letting me know.
Well, it's amazing because they're looking at the human. You don't think about astronauts having emotions and what's they're away from their family for 3 years. It was brilliant, eh? The way they played, they explored the human side of that.
And the relationships and the egos and.
Yeah, which all would happen, right?
Yeah, and living on top of each other too.
Yeah.
We were talking about the idea of appropriation of resources, and when we go to Mars or the moon, we're going to be mining. It's going to be part of the industry because we're going to be creating structures, 3D structures out of the rocks and soil of these planets. I mean, that's what we're looking at doing. And Jeff Bezos has got the contract for the Artemis project, which is going to the moon. And he is going to be building rockets and a habitat. And right now, Amazon is being addressed by Amnesty International because of his mistreatment of his employees. And here I have this child, Victorian era, who worked in the mines. And children as young as 5 years old would be crawling on their hands and knees in the dark with harnesses attached to carts full of rocks for 10, 12-hour days, and they didn't have childhoods. And I think about right now, if you're at Amazon and you want to leave, you can leave. But if you're on Mars and you're a laborer, you're going to have your CEO is going to be in charge of your housing, your food, and your oxygen supply. And so my question is, would you want Jeff Bezos to be in charge of your oxygen supply? Yeah. And I think about things like, what if there's an issue with the oxygen supply? Like right now, Perseverance is going to be recycling, or it's going to be turning CO2 into oxygen and putting it in tanks. So what if that breaks down? What if there's a malfunction and there's 80% oxygen? Who's going to get it?
Yeah.
These are all these kind of questions.
Yeah. Oh my God! Just as you said, anybody who chooses to go, they're basically they're prisoners. I mean, they do not have freedom.
Well, this is the thing that I think is I'm trying to say in this talk, in this body of work, is that we are living in this kind of dynamic right now, and we don't even see it. And but we can see it. There are certain people in society that are living the consequences of it. So this one here, I just created a little Victorian box
This
with
is
a
amazing. Yeah.
Martian rock. And if you use your QR code, you
Yeah.
can see a video I made about a childhood lost. Now this, I just wanted to point out to this, I'm using archival images to work from, and this is, you know, taken from an image of a little girl, and she looks like an old woman.
Wow. Does she
And
ever?
what I found was so interesting in looking at a lot of these images is these children had the weight of the world on their shoulders, and so they
Yeah.
look so old. It was really interesting to reference them, and I just looked like a little old lady, but she was like 10 years old.
It's true. Like when you look at a lot of the older photography, you wonder, you think, oh, well, you know, people must have been matured more quickly. Yeah, because they were working.
Yeah, she's working in a mine.
And they were probably eating horrible foods and
Yeah.
living really harsh lives. Is that Shackleton?
No, this is Roland Amundsen.
Okay.
And he's probably one of the best well-known explorers of that Victorian era. He went through the Northwest Passage and also
Oh, okay,
South
right.
Pole. Now he took a different route than the English explorers in that he hired Inuk people to dress him. So he's wearing furs to be guides and to use their sled dogs. So he said adventure is just bad planning. Although he did have a run-in with a polar bear, but I did that.
So is this one of the first guys who went to North Pole, or is that someone else?
He was the South Pole.
South Pole. So
He
you're
was
South
South
Pole.
Pole, yeah.
Okay, South Pole. Sorry.
But you know, you can imagine at the time how treacherous it was.
Oh.
But he was very, very organized. And he's from Norway. It's a little cool, you know.
So he was a Nordic person.
Yeah, he already understood.
He knew that.
Yeah, he knew what he was getting.
As
himself
opposed to,
into.
like you say, the English who were kind of.
Like wearing sweaters. There's, I mean, you can see the picture of Shackleton. That's him on the journey on the Endurance, and he's wearing a sweater.
It's. I can't even imagine people who came to North America, and especially Canada, the northern parts, 200 years ago. You didn't have polar fleece and
No.
down jackets, and I mean, if you follow like this fellow the way of the Inuit people, you would be properly dressed. But
So there is an explorer called Matthew Henson who co-discovered the North Pole with Peary in 1904, and he said, "I believe I'm the first person to stand at the top of the world." Now I hadn't heard of Henson. Like I heard about Shackleton and Peary and Scott and Atkinson, and it was interesting when I looked him up. I saw that he was African American, and I thought this is really interesting that we don't know much about him. We don't see his face, and I thought, well, I could draw him, but I thought I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually draw the impact of not hearing about him on generations of that time and moving forward. So I chose these two little girls wearing these, you know, Victorian children's clothes, and I thought about how is this going to be impacting them in the future. And one of the things I noticed is the straight hair, and that's one thing that has been an issue for women of color, that in order to have middle class status, they have to straighten their hair. And as late as 2010, there was a woman in the United States who was told she could not keep her job if she did not cut off her locks. She took it to court. She lost in 2013. And then she went to the Supreme Court in 2016 and lost.
yeah,
So and you'll still see that. You'll still see children being sent home.
yeah,
And-
African American women who want to have the like cornrows or
Yeah.
just afro even.
Yeah, it's considered messy. It's not professional.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and I think it directly relates to not being included in history and not being included as.
Yeah. Well, and not appreciating the beauty of someone else's culture.
Yeah, or just like you're saying, like seeing people as human beings.
Human beings, and you know.
giving them even standing. I'm going to go next to. I'll talk a little bit about this one here, and then we'll go to that one. This one here just sort of refers to the idea that we always want more. No matter what, where we are, we always want more.
Grasping for more.
You know, we have now, like, this is like the Victorian hand, so it kind of speaks to the Victorians wanting to reach out and go to different countries and to discover, like, I like the word discover, new lands, and new resources and new people. And we're like that now with Mars, that we just don't have enough.
Someone wants to possess or be the,
Yeah.
The, again, in that show Away, just that they struggled with that, and some of the astronauts were like, we're going to be the very first people to step on Mars. Like, we'll die for that. Just like...
It's really, I don't know, I don't even understand.
No,
it's so important.
It doesn't gel with my maybe self-preservation or appreciation of what I have, as opposed to, But then others will say, well, we wouldn't have gone anywhere if we didn't have that kind of expansionist, kind of exploratory drive.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at the development of humanity, and you know, what was there, like 20 different kinds of hobbits I've known so far, and they traveled all through not only Africa, but they left Africa and went through Europe and Asia, and so they were always moving on, and there's been fights among different tribes and groups and bands of people since the very beginning.
So I mean, indigenous peoples fought with each other, and I sometimes toy with the idea of writing the speculative fiction novel or graphic novel that's, imagine if this expansion, this urge to expand, happened in a way that was very peaceful, and that, you know, as people traveled, it was always about honoring the people who were there and learning, and the opposite of the way it was, right?
Yeah, maybe that's, you know, that is the future.
Let's hope.
I think we have that.
The Star Trek kind of, you know, well, you know, that was the idea. They were exploring, but, you know, do no harm.
The Prime Directive.
The Prime Directive, right?
Yeah.
Do no harm, and you know, we're out to understand. I mean, of course, there's a lot of fighting and.
But you know what's interesting? This actually, the whole idea that started with Star Trek, it still is this kind of colonial construct. Like you have, it's based on the military. And
it
you
is,
have,
yes,
you know, the hierarchies, and Jordan Peterson would love it. And what I thought was really interesting when I watched the original series is I thought, there's all this new technology, which is so interesting. They can go into warp speed into another galaxy and beam down, but they still had a white man in charge, and the women all wore short skirts and had big hair.
They were all sexy and beautiful,
and they served coffee, or they were, you know, hora. You know, even though this was incredible that you had a black woman on the show, you know, she was a receptionist. So it was really interesting that they had these kind of roles, and even I saw one just the other night, and the Klingons they were all white men with like brown makeup on. I thought, and they're evil too.
I know. There's all that.
Gene Roddenberry, like he was so progressive in some ways, and he did talk about racism. But he's so deep in his own culture that he actually didn't see that what he was doing was racist. So I thought about that too. Like we need to consider the cultural implications.
Well, there's a novel by Philip K. Dick written in the '60s, and it's projected into the year 2068, I think. And there was a black man running for president, and even at that time, he couldn't imagine. Basically, someone killed him because they didn't want a black president, and here we are in 2020, and we've already had 8 years of a black president. So they couldn't imagine in the 60s that there would be a black president. It's
not that long ago.
That wasn't long ago.
But then segregation's not that long ago either.
Oh my God,
even slavery really is not that long ago.
Not really in the grand scheme of things, eh?
Women haven't had the vote for more than just a little over 100 years.
So this okay, let's go over here. I thought we were going to look at this one.
This one kind of responds to the one we were just talking about the idea of always wanting more. And this references Henry David Thoreau, who's a 19th century philosopher and poet. And he basically said, if you have imagination, you can go anywhere from your armchair. You don't have to travel long distances. You have a beautiful home, you have a beautiful life. You can enjoy what you have here. So I juxtaposed his quotes over images of Mars.
We'll talk about this a little bit. So you're not just doing painting; you're constructing and doing sculpture, and
yeah, definitely.
which all your shows have had different elements of installation, construction, and love that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I find that working in different that really helps me to kind of tell the story. And I like the idea of layering of media, because I think just saying it one way is very, very restrictive. So I don't start out thinking, I'm going to do paintings and sculptures. I just think, okay, well, this is what I want to say. How best can I say it? This one here kind of refers back to when we were talking about Jeff Bezos having a contract for Artemis. Elon Musk is building starships for SpaceX, and he has a contract now with NASA. He sent Bob and Doug up to the space station, and he's put up some satellites now. He kind of moved between the space debris to get them up there. And he wants to build starships and have 1 million people on Mars by 2050.
Wow.
And he's thinking 100 people and 100 tons of equipment in each starship. And he'd have like 2 or 3 leaving a day in that time period where we're closest to Mars. So that means like every 26 months is when we can go to Mars, because it's when it's closest to us. And actually right now is one of those time periods. So if you look out in the sky, you can see Mars.
Right, I heard
and
that, yeah.
It's gorgeous, and it's big, so it's an exciting time to see it. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking, how does this relate to how people lived in the Victorian era when they left their villages? And when they were living in their villages, they had time to visit their neighbors. They could manage their own schedule. They lived by the sun, and they actually lived by the cycles of
kind of circadian rhythms.
Their circadian rhythms, yeah. So when they moved into the factories, when their land was taken from them, they moved into the factories. They're working 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. They had very little time to spend with their family or their friends. They couldn't go to festivities anymore, and they were in these enclosed, cramped environments, and they were very unhealthy. So, what's it going to be like for people?
So this is sort of like a city, self-contained city, yeah.
Well, 8 months. So you know what it was like. We were talking about away, which was so great. They talked about that journey, but that's only the first part. So they're stuck together for 8 months.
Yeah.
Then they're living in these habitats which are very restrictive, and you can only leave.
And they're trying to terraform, trying to replicate Earth in a bubble, basically, right?
Yeah.
So is this the ship, or this is the once they land?
It's a ship.
It is the ship.
So I was, when I looked at creating the images for these larger paintings, I just thought about 1950s sci-fi.
Yeah.
And I thought this was kind of.
It's fun. It's very bug-like.
Yeah. Very it's like an anthropomorphic kind of spaceship. Actually, Elon Musk's starships are really phallic. You take a look at them.
So there's an architect, kind of visionary architect, Paolo Solari, he sort of designed cities that would contain it all in one block, and it's just like, I don't even like being in a condo building or like an apartment building, right? Like, it means.
Think about what it's like right now when we're so isolated from each other, and we're restricted in our movements, but at least you can go outside for a walk, or go to a grocery store, or sit in your backyard.
You either have to go to the garden. Well, and like in a way, all the plants died except one, and basically the captain sacrificed her own water supply to try and keep it alive.
Yeah.
If they had all died, there would have been no terraforming.
No, I love that scene.
Yeah.
Well, they would be, I mean, the terraforming is something that's gonna happen over a period of time, it's gonna
Sure.
be hundreds of years.
Of course, okay.
And, actually, one of the images up here talks about that, it's just the one with the crystal here. Right now, they're
Oh, look at
testing
that.
to see how trees, how cold it can get for trees to survive, so how far north,
Right.
we can go.
Okay.
And there actually are places on Earth where they're experimenting with people living in these kind of harsh environments. Actually,
Right,
in
right.
Canada, there is right now.
Right. Like within the those habitats, or actually just going up north and
Yeah, it's a place in northern Canada, the name eludes me, but I
just the
think
kind
it's
of
Devon Island.
that kind of harsh. Yeah, I mean, I know a few people who live in northern Quebec. Yeah, they love it. One of them grew up in Brazil, and the other is East Indian from Canada, but they love the north.
Yeah,
Oh, look at this! It's great.
Yeah.
I just want to also say the paintings are exquisite. They are
Oh,
quite
thank
lovely.
you.
And are you working with oil or acrylic?
Both.
Both. Okay.
So I do the base in acrylic and then I
Okay.
do oil over top.
Okay.
So you can see like that, like the eye is in oil because
Yeah.
it's a little more modulated.
It's a yes, exactly.
And
Yeah.
then I work really flatly with the acrylic, so it kind of gives
Okay,
a real
okay,
contrast
so
and
you-
kind of punches.
So you're using each paint for to its best ability, right? The
Yeah.
acrylics are great for that, and it'll
Yeah.
dry fast. Whereas the oil, you have a lot more time, and you can modulate. It's much more sensual.
It's not sensual.
I always tell people I think of acrylic as digital and oil as analog.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Actually. Yeah,
You
that's
can
true.
never get. You can try and simulate that kind of analog quality, whether you're talking about sound or paint. You know, with acrylics, you can use all kinds of retarded gels and stuff and sort of simulate, but it doesn't have the organic quality of oil paint, does it?
No, like it's got like that. But I actually like using acrylic to look like it's plastic.
Yes,
You know, let-
exactly,
use
right.
it for what it's good
You're
for.
using it for what its best qualities are. That it's plastic, it dries fast.
But you know, one of the things I do, because I work so big, is that I do the underpainting all in acrylic. And then I'll do glazes in oil
Sure.
just to give it that richness, or just the oil in places.
Sure.
So, because to paint this whole background in acrylic or in oil is just, would be arduous, but it would be modulated. I don't want it to be modulated.
And you would have to wait a month for it to dry.
Yeah. What's that take?
Or whatever, yeah.
So this one is talking about Big Brother. This references Orwell 1984, and it's the idea that we have given up all our information to social media, and we have. If you think about it, all of our likes, all of our desires, everything that we look for on Google is all put together with and documented. And then we are, through algorithms, given back information and products that we would like to consume. Our
Exactly,
credit card's
yeah.
already on file with Amazon, buy now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's very easy. And I was thinking about how, why did we give up everything to social media? And I thought, well, we've always had these stratified societies. We would look up to the church or the government or the
Sure.
overlord,
The wealthy or
the,
yeah.
the company, or
Yeah.
we've always the king or queen. We're used to having these authority figures who we relinquish ourselves to.
Certain hierarchical structure.
Yeah, hierarchy. Yeah, definitely. We have a
Yeah.
hierarchical structure, and so I had a little fun with this one. I made the eye, and this part was very simple, but I added a switch to it.
Yeah.
Because that little switch is a little bit of hope. Like
Okay, you can turn it off.
we can
or
turn it all
yeah.
off. We don't
yeah,
have to
yeah.
keep it on. So, but that one I had a lot of fun with. And that one kind of refers to this one here, which is called echo chamber. And we, as mentioned, we have these algorithms that perpetuate our sense of self, our sense of identity, and our sense of the world. And so we create these avatars, and these avatars these avatars are put out into society, and we look to likes to for our own sense of identity, but then people don't really actually know who we are. And so I think about this idea too, that this looping, self-perpetuating loop just loops back to our own sense of the world. We're not really seeing the whole story, and we're very isolated because of it.
You've kind of put ourselves in a box.
Yeah, we put ourselves in a box. Okay, this one. I want to talk a little bit about this one here.
Which one are we talking? Here.
Yeah.
So,
And then we'll refer back to these ones here. Sometimes
we're winging it.
So it's going to be this one I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
Do you want me beside it, or?
It's up to you. I mean, if you're beside it, you're.
Maybe I won't be beside it.
Okay, I can focus in on the piece.
Yeah. So this piece talks about how our environment changes our physiology, and in Victorian era, of course, women were.
I'm just going to stand behind.
Impacted by. They were impacted by corsets and this idea of ideal beauty. And of course that caused an enormous amount of health problems. Their organs were pushed in places they shouldn't go, and they would have fainting spells, and it was difficult for them to breathe at times. And I thought about how our physiology would change when we go to Mars and we're in the environment of Mars. And they have looked at scientists looked at studies of animals that have been in space, and they found that these animals develop fibrosis. So we really don't know how our lives are going to be affected, but we are living in a place where the oxygen is going to be manufactured, and we're going to be living in 30% gravity. That's not something they can really change at the moment. And then we look over here of the spines, and there's an astronaut on the space station, and for a year, the space between his vertebrae grew to the point where he was 2 inches taller, and his bones weakened as well. So we're probably going to be a lot weaker, we're going to be taller, and eventually we're going to evolve into a different kinds of species to the point where we will not probably be able to mate with Earthlings. We are going to become Martians, and I like to call us Homo mascus.
Yeah, there's so many, the X factor. I'm sure they've created all kinds of computer generated simulations of how it's going to be, but you just don't know, right? That's again one of the things in the way where the older man, the Russian fellow, he lost his eyesight. Something to do with just being in space.
Yeah. Yeah, they think what's going to happen to be a lot weaker, and then we will evolve to be stronger. We're going to have to, otherwise we won't survive.
Right. Well, we will have to adapt, right?
Yeah.
We are adaptable organisms.
And we are. Yeah, definitely.
But it takes, generations, right?
Yeah, hundreds of years,
maybe thousands of years to.
Yeah, definitely. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, one of the things I think about is pregnancy. How do you carry a pregnancy to full term with 30% gravity?
Right, and will the system, the rhythm of the Martian planet change? Right. I mean, I think all our body systems are adapted for Earth.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah. Well, I think that's one reason why Mars Ones do not want people to be engaging in sexual activity, because they don't have to deal with pregnancy. Like, it's just, I don't know how to deal with that. But it's an interesting thing that I find, and I've read absolutely nothing about it, which probably has to do with more of a sexist kind of viewpoint. And I'm thinking what happens to women's cycles?
Yeah.
Like
that will.
With our, that we're only thinking of it from a male point of view, but
Well, aren't they linked to the Earth's moon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen?
Right.
What's going to happen to that?
And there's something to do with the gravity of the moon and the fluid within our bodies.
Yeah. So it's another question, but like as I said, I've not found anything about that. This one kind of references the idea of Genesis and being expelled from even.
So is this the actual painting you showed us before when?
Yeah.
Or, okay, yeah, it was stretched on the wall.
Yes, I did both of these on the wall separately. I mean,
Okay.
it is a diptych, but I decided to keep it a little bit apart.
Yeah,
here.
no, that's lovely.
Thank you. And yeah, this is talks about turning Earth into Mars, and Mars into Earth. So Eve has been expelled from the garden, and now she, as a representative of the human race, wants to move forward and create new life on another planet. And this is a reference from a circus entertainer, a snake tamer from the Victorian era. And here I have Papua New Guinea mudman, and looking at a Martian astronaut on two sides of the abyss. And I think what I wanted to say with this is that we have a beautiful planet with biodiversity, and it functions very well for us. I have no problem with exploring Mars and going to Mars, but I think our priority should be here and the treatment of our planet and the people who live on it.
Right, we can't just escape to another planet, right? When we've just basically abused and depleted this one.
Yeah, I feel like we're just turning this one into garbage, and then we're just going to go somewhere else. And it's incredible when you think about space travel that we have so much garbage in the oceans and on land, and we're polluting the planet.
Yeah.
But there's so much garbage in our orbit. We have so much space degree that we just almost had a collision last week.
Isn't that crazy?
They're already having problems launching satellites because of so much garbage in space.
And how many satellites are there now? There must be thousands of communication satellites.
There's so many, but there's all like old ones that have been up there for many years.
Right,
I mean, some of them come back down, but a lot of them are just staying in orbit, and they're just garbage.
You're just looking up for my stepson yesterday. The Sputnik was like 57, so that's, what is that, 55 years, 53 years, I guess.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's really incredible.
And then how many failed space missions and just junk. Yeah.
That's my next show, actually. It's gonna be fun. This one here, I'll just talk to this one and I'll end it with this one here. I'm just gonna do this here.
This looks like COVID.
It's COVID, yeah. Like I painted this in March, and I was just thinking about, what would happen on Mars if we had this kind of pandemic. Like, how could we get away? How could we socially distance? How could we control a virus? It's like and so I've got like the bombs.
It's a landmine,
during the Victorian era, and I just thought you just step on the wrong one and you're done. And I kind of feel like coronavirus and those, or any kind of virus, and those kind of restricted environments could be really dangerous. And we're always going to have viruses because.
Well, and we don't really know. Like, there are probably viruses and organisms that are curable on Earth, but you get up there and. Right? Maybe they, become super viruses or super, whatever. We don't know.
They mutate.
They mutate. Exactly. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, they would mutate, or so many unknowables.
There's so and this is what I'm trying to look at.
All
like
this is about,
things that
and in the same way, 200 years ago, or 300 years ago, or 400 years ago, whenever people started the great, adventure, it was unknowable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And we only know what we know. We can only talk.
And at least now we've got like 400 or 500 years of, terrestrial exploration to hopefully use that wisdom and knowledge that, to be less abusive in colonial. Although you're down,
I don't know if that's happening. But like, Edmondson said, adventure is just bad planning. So. I'm just going to end it, I think, on. Oh, do you want to go and look at this one?
This is very lovely.
Thank you.
So I'm going to, just the colors and the shapes, and we don't necessarily have to talk about it.
Okay, no worries.
But you had a piece you wanted to end on?
Yeah, I just one is just, it's just a rock. So I thought of a Martian rock covered in Victorian fabric and tassels. It's just essentially saying that we're doing the same thing.